So we will spend the next hour exploring place-based outdoor learning opportunities and how we can invite those and create those opportunities. Also, of course, because we're POPEY, how to weave that into some literacy related opportunities for reflecting, thinking, talking, reading, and writing. And I am co-presenting today with Jen, my lovely colleague up in the Shuswap area, and I'm Lisa, and I'm the program manager and a teacher consultant for POPEY. Our website, poppy.ca, the handouts are available there, as well as a lot of resources to support reading, writing, oral language and word work, effective classroom practice, as well as elements of ELA, the curriculum, and the core competencies. So we are recording this session and we'll post it on our POPEY YouTube channel next week. And there is captioning available in the Zoom toolbar with the 3 dots that says more. You can enable the captioning if you would like to use that feature. And so what we'll be spending this hour together looking at are those opportunities for place-based learning and ways at looking at nature-based exploration and curiosity and infusing that into our routines and our schedule throughout the school year. Rain or shine, something for all seasons, and how we can get our kids more immersed in nature and rooted and grounded in the places where they live, and use that as a really strong anchor for noticing and observing and storytelling and tying back to historical roots and Indigenous roots and ownership and belonging of the land, and using that as a way to, I think, really slow down and notice and explore and put on our explorer scientific hats. So as always, we'll share a little bit of theory on some of the best practice current research. We will give you some modeling and demonstrations of some activities and routines you can use with your students on your school grounds or at your local park, the environment where you are, wherever that might be in BC. And chances for you to check in. So we've got our mood meter here today. It seemed fitting with the outdoor ed focus. What kind of squirrel do you feel like today? So from 1 to 9, what number best represents your mood? You can enter that into the chat box. I think I'm definitely feeling like a 6 today.
Me too. The 6 kind of day.
Yes. If you're feeling like an 8, maybe you can let us know what your secret is. So feel free to put a number into the chat box. That'll
There's
be
quite
a nice
a few
check-in for us. Oh, fantastic. And for anybody feeling like a 5, we'll do our best to keep it energized and engaging without being too much. So thank you very much. Yeah. All right. So in doing some research for us today, I came across a fabulous book, and it's called The Big Book of Nature Activities, a year-round guide to outdoor learning. So the authors are noted there at the bottom of the slide, and they had some alarming and surprising figures. And Jen and I were just talking about maybe how this is quite different from when we were kids. And we were talking about the radius for how far we were allowed to just freely explore outside with our friends without a parent watching us. And maybe that was like 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers. And now how it seems like there's been a shift and kids are kept much closer to home with not as much free play and not as much time free playing outside to do that exploring. So these are some interesting numbers. I know they're in the handout. So if you have the handout, you can't really, you can guess, but I know you've already seen it, but it was just quite staggering to me. So the number of advertising messages a child encounters in a day, you can take a guess if you don't have the handout. Put your guess in the chat box. So 2,500. Number of hours the average North American child sits in front of a screen each year. Even more than that, almost 3,000 hours. The number of corporate logos the average child can identify. Also shocking, 300. And the number of native plants and animals the average child can identify was a whopping 10. So is there a way we can help bump up the time that kids spend in nature as part of their school day, and starting to be able to notice and name and identify some of the plants and animals that are native to wherever you are? And this comes out of the BC's early learning framework. And part of our intention with creating this workshop and focusing in on this content was to be able to help support BC educators with that, being able to reconnect or connect for the first time our students to the land, the culture, the community, and places where you are. And so the ways that early learning can be of a place that we can create the opportunities and set our students up for them to engage with local histories and have that respectful curiosity and the desire to contribute and share, and what an important key role Indigenous peoples have been as knowledge keepers of these places for hundreds of generations. And so those Indigenous languages as well are some of the voices of these places. And how can we bring in these peoples and their voices and their stories as well, and make that an explicit connection for our students, and beginning to have that stronger connection and the appreciation and the respect for the land that we live on. And we'll be looking at ways to connect, not just with the land, but also with each other, and be able to be well-versed in thoughtful reflection and conversation. And one of the activities we found recently as well is from the Beatles Project. So they've got a really wonderful website online. It's resources for outdoor science programs. So again, really, we love that scientific thinking, having the explorer mindset on asking questions. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Your observations. And really make some natural ties to literacy, to reading and writing and conversation opportunities and sketching and all of those things, while also being very scientific. So this routine that we're pulling out of that I'll guide us through, and I'll set up a little bit of what it's like, and then I'll give you an example of that, because we're not all together and we can't wander outside together. I've got an image that we'll look at and we'll walk through what this would be like. So the routine is called I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of. And it's an exploration routine that you could do regularly, daily, quite often with our students in different ways, whether that's inside or outside. But it's helping our students develop that mindset of curiosity and supporting them with the language to help them actively and directly engage with the natural world. It also supports social emotional learning. We're supporting them in teaching and modeling for them how we can reflect. And we are setting it up with that tone of learning, collaborating, and listening. And so that helps us to create an inclusive, culturally relevant learning environment. And so we are scaffolding those cognitive thinking skills, those scientific thinking skills, and the observational approach to exploring the world around us. So we're setting them up and giving them the time and the structure and the skills to be able to reflect on, value, and share those relevant connections that we're allowing them to make, and bringing in their lived experience and their own individual unique perspectives. So really honoring not just the land, but also our students, because what they're seeing and noticing and the connections that they're making is at the center of their experience. Here's the whole activity overview for I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of. And you can see these 3 steps are just part of a much bigger lesson plan or a learning cycle, the stages here. And on the right-hand column there, you've got some estimated times you could spend with your students on this. So down at the bottom, you see, you could spend up to 45 minutes or even more than an hour. Obviously, if you're doing this for the first time with your students, it would probably be short and sweet and ease them into it and build up their stamina and their expectations and their ability to know the parameters. And also with younger students, you'd probably want to spend just short amounts of time here. So if you, on this slide and the link, if you're looking at our e-handout, you can go to their website where it lays this out, and there's pages and pages of a PDF that we pulled this from. So if you are interested in trying out replicating this lesson or making it your own, you can get the full write-up and all the descriptors and the learning outcomes on their website as part of this activity. But you can see it's like, for us, what we're focusing on, the noticing, wonder, and reminding them of, is the exploration piece. And then you can move on through the whole process. If you were doing the whole thing from start to end, we're looking at how to apply our noticing and our wonderings, what comes up out of the explorations, also being able to reflect on it, and then using that scientific thinking and the scientific language as we approach, you know, anything that we're interacting with. It doesn't just have to be the natural world. So it's a transferable skill set for our kids. So the learning outcomes or the objectives, we're helping our students to increase their curiosity and directly engage with different aspects of the natural world. We're framing it for them and modeling how to make observations, ask questions, and relate the findings to past experiences, and making that really important distinction that we can describe what things look like in our observations, and sort of the qualities and characteristics, adjectives for how we would describe things, and how that's distinct and separate from an opinion we might have about whether we like something, what we think of it, if we think it's important, that sort of distinctions there, which again is really, really helpful as part of their creative and critical thinking. So if we stretch our imaginations, or if you squint maybe, we can pretend we're all sitting together outside in a beautiful BC forest, and we're looking at this spectacular spider web. And so I invite you, what do you notice? And I invite you to share that one thing you notice, share it in the chat box with us, and then you can see other people's noticings as well. Maybe Jen, I'll get you if you can, just sort of keep an eye on that chat box, what people are saying they notice.
Mm-hmm. So lots of people are noticing the raindrops and the fact that it looks wet, there's symmetry, there's a hole in the center of the web, drops of water, a spider. The interconnectedness of it all. Oh, that was a big word. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Sigrid said elegance. Yeah, there is something elegant about that, isn't there?
Yes, the design, like people are mentioning the design, the symmetry, the elegance, the, you know, how it's constructed, how the web is constructed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, balance and tension. Yeah, so some really lovely words here. Could open up some conversation about if someone's introducing some new vocabulary everyone might not be familiar with. And the next step is I wonder. So what's one thing you wonder looking at this scene?
So people are wondering about the spider and what kind it is, if it's hungry, how long it took to construct the web, and if it's hunting. Oh, lots of great wondering. A lot focused on, yeah, what the spider's doing and how the web was constructed, what's going to fly into the web.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm wondering, I see some stray bits of webbing by the spider's, the bottom of one of its feet. So did it just finish the nest, the web, and is it taking a little rest? And is that big hole in the middle supposed to be a big hole, or is it going to get closed up? Or is that where maybe some insects will get caught? So all of these wonderings, whether we talk about them and share them orally, the teacher writes them down, or kids are able to sketch or write down their own wonderings in a notebook, this would be really wonderful then for launching some exploration and some research. And we can get our hands on some books and different resources online or in textbooks about spiders and start to answer our own questions and each other's questions as well. So the third part here, my final question I'll pose to you, it reminds me of. So if you can finish that sentence starter. It reminds me of the time I came upon a wolf spider in my kitchen sink and
Oh,
was
I know you love spiders.
terrified. This is me like boosting my bravery by even including a picture of a spider. It's like I'm getting stronger by the minute here. Yeah.
Absolutely. It just looks so much more West Coastish than where I live. So much more green and wet and, you know, all of those wonderful. Yes. But some people are connecting to different books and connecting to, you know, the architecture and some stories about spiders.
Oh, Charlotte's Web, yeah. And patterns we might see in some, you know, things that people make. And I don't know about you, and I know you're here and Jen and I are guiding this and we're asking you to look at this spider web for so long, but I don't know the last time that I actually in nature, when I was out for a walk, looked at a spider web with this much care and attention. And there's something quite nice about the slowing down to do that. A little bit meditative after a busy day of work. So thank you for sharing all of that. And you can see everyone brings a different perspective. You each bring your own prior knowledge and experience with you, information you might have about spiders if you're into them. For me, it's mostly been about how to avoid them. So I don't have a ton of information about them, but there's an opportunity there for me to learn from people like you. And so this is something you could make a routine, and having like a sit spot on your school grounds or outside. Your kids could have little sketchbooks and go out with pencils and sketch and notice what they see, write down their questions or talk about their questions. And this could be a really easy routine to build in, and just focusing in on a very small moment or a very small element of the natural world outside. This also is a quote from the early learning framework. And we love this because it reinforces that scientific reasoning and thinking and observing, and looking at our role as educators as how we can be partners in research with our students. And to me, that's really exciting. And so nurturing and naming and teasing out and really making explicit the observation, the listening skills, the experimenting, and being open to things that may be unexpected in the natural world. And you gotta love a slug.
That's also very West Coastish.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes. Yeah, raise your hand if you've stepped on a banana slug. Big, picky squish. And of course, we can reinforce and support the nature-based outdoor learning opportunities with some of the texts we bring into our classroom. This is an ebook that we have made based on a book from Epic. So Get Epic is the website. That sort of, someone once said it's like Netflix for books, which I loved the analogy. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this. We'll read a couple of pages in the first chapter, and then we'll stop. So based on these first couple of activities that we did with the I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of, and some of that research on how much time kids do or don't spend in nature connecting with land, we wanted to give you a bit of time to reflect on this and then share. So what does it mean to connect with land and space? What can we help our students notice, wonder, and explore in our community? How can we support our students' communication and thinking skills as they interact with the world around them? And then how can we help students ground their stories that they tell orally or get down in writing? How can we help them ground their stories in land and place?
Yeah, thank you so much. This actually feeds really well into what we're going to be talking about here, which is just how this works with our time in nature, and how that this can be hugely beneficial for us. And I think living in BC, it's very easy to see the benefits of being in nature. And Lisa and I have often asked during these workshops, asked teachers, what was your favorite moment in the summer, or how do you decrease stress? And it's always coming back often to nature, being in nature. So I think that, you know, in BC, we are so lucky to have such a beautiful province to explore and be in nature. And I think that that was really highlighted during the pandemic, how lucky we have been. But really, when we look at those aspects of well-being that our students gain from being in nature, like the things that feed their soul and the things that feed their mind. So having that happiness, having, you know, the resilience and the freedom, but also having stress reduction and healthy risk taking. Those are aspects that we can really highlight within the work that we're doing with students. And I just really love this quote: "No one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they've never experienced." So going back to, this is a wonderful way that we can work with our students. If you're here, obviously you're already interested in outdoor learning and place-based learning. And just the fact that it's free, we can do this very easily in our world, which we're so lucky to be able to do that. So let's take a look at what this could actually look like. What can it actually look like when we think about those aspects that I just talked about, the happiness, the healthy risk-taking, and what does that actually come down to when we're thinking about an activity that we can do outside? So I chose a really easy one, climbing a tree. And I'd like you to think about, what does a child need to consider when planning to climb a tree, and what might they experience when climbing the tree? So breaking it down into those little bits. And again, I'm going to give you a timer here for 1 minute, so you can have a little bit of thinking time with this. Just consider, what does the child need to consider or experience when climbing a tree? So thinking about the risk taking, a lot of you mentioned that, the structure, how strong does the tree need to be to hold the child up? They might experience an exhilarating feeling, problem solving. Oh, wow, they're working independently. They have to kind of plan their route up the tree. They have to consider what clothing they're wearing, maybe not high heels. Being off the ground, that's what that's going to feel like. Oh my goodness, there's so many wonderful things that you've considered here. And a couple of those I've listed here for you as well. So a lot of you talked about how, like, having a plan. How am I going to start? Testing for strength, you mentioned that. Perseverance, so having that, you know, that attitude of resilience, and seeing the world from a different perspective. You mentioned that, being up higher in the height aspect, and deciding how high to climb. That problem solving, that critical thinking, how high should I climb? So you can see just that one little activity can produce so many different benefits for our students. So thank you for engaging in that. We're going to continue on here. Now I'm going to give you a moment to read this quote on your own, and then we're going to have a quick chat about it. So I'll just be quiet for 15 seconds. Okay, so when I read this quote, I'm really thinking about a school that I know here in the North Okanagan Shuswap School District, that their philosophy is outdoor learning. So this really speaks to me, and what the philosophy that they have built for the school, because it's not just an outdoor learning school, but their aim is to provide opportunities for students to engage with local ecosystems. And they're doing that through inquiry, through experience, and through reflection. So that's how they're looking at the curriculum, is through the lens of nature. So it's not an add-on, it's not something to do on top of the curriculum, but it's actually looking at teaching the curriculum through nature, through engaging in nature, through inquiring about nature, and through reflection on nature. And I really loved when Lisa said that, you know, when was the last time that we spent this much time looking at a spider web and really noticing and slowing down? And I feel like that that is spoken about in this quote, and that, you know, when we're looking at that presence of the ecosystem around us, we can slow down and really have some deep thinking and some deep reflection about what is happening around us. So what that can look like, that whole connection of the curriculum, teaching the curriculum through the lens of nature, we're going to explore that a little bit. So with this example, exploring the seasons with our senses and focusing on fall, what does that look like? It can look like leaves changing color. I'm looking outside my window right now and seeing the most gorgeous amount of color in the trees right now. But it also can look like raindrops and puddles, sounds like crunchy leaves and raindrops on my roof. I love that sound. Tastes like pumpkin pie and hearty soups and stews. When I was actually preparing for this workshop this morning, I thought, I gotta run to the grocery store and pick up some things for a nice, like, hearty soup to have for dinner. So I did, because it reminded me of this workshop. But it smells like rain and that cedar, new pencils, I love that. And feels like crunchy leaves and slimy slugs like the one that we just talked about, the banana slug. So now it's your turn. You can really see how we can get really in depth with this and enjoy looking at seasons through our senses, which is definitely connected to the work that we do with our primary students in their curriculum learning. So I'm going to give you 90 seconds here, and I'd like you to choose a season that you want to focus on and just jot down a few things about what it looks like, sounds like, tastes like, smells like, feels like. You could just focus on one if you want, and you have 90 seconds. But I'm going to have you share one or two thoughts with us in the chat box of the aspects that you came up with that are connected to the senses after 90 seconds. Okay, let's see what you came up with. So if you could just say the season and some of the sensory experiences that you put in here. Okay, summer, green leaves, sunny skies, bathing suits, lakes. Yes, for sure. Blue skies, giant white fluffy clouds, sunscreen, sorry. Oh, winter, nice work. So crunchy footsteps, tastes like hot chocolate and marshmallows. I can just totally feel that. And Lisa wrote about summer as well, blooming flowers, dinner on the barbecue. Wonderful. Fall, changing colors. Oh, this is great. Like, can you just see how easily this can turn into like a poetry experience for our students, and how, you know, we could introduce so many like similes and, oh my goodness, so many cool things that you could do with this. New connections. Oh, I like that, Rachel, with fall. Yes. Okay, awesome. So you can see how easily we can, you know, bring in some of the curriculum. This could be done all seasons of the year if you wanted to really give students a chance to be outside and think about what they are hearing, what they are smelling, and connecting that way. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to connect to a place. So I want you to think about one place that is special to you, that it would, one natural place, I'll say that, that you would just hate to see paved over. Like, it would be the worst thing. It's like the next Walmart parking lot. You just can't have that happen. So think about the place. I'm not going to give you a timer this time, but I'm just going to have you picture that place and have it in your mind in 5 seconds. And then we'll move on. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to give me a thumbs up if, did the place you think of, if any of these are true? Did it bring up emotion? Was it from your past? Was it somewhere you went with family or friends? And was it significant for a community? Okay, so Lisa, you can scroll through and see how many thumbs up I have, because awesome. Lots
Ruth
of
is
thumbs
saying
up.
yes to all. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yes, right? Okay, so I'm
Mhm.
hearing lots of yeses, yes, 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 and lots of thumbs up. That's great. So now I want you to think, like, everyone has a place that matters to them. Now, considering what the stats that Lisa shared with us at the beginning of the session today, what do you think how do you think your students would respond to this? Out of curiosity, do you think that they have this connection to place that would bring up that emotion that was from, somewhere that they went with family and friends, that's significant to them? So just keep that in your mind as we continue through, because I really believe that teachers, like, we can provide that for our students too. We can give them opportunities to find that place that they're connected to, if they are not getting that, maybe through, if they're not experiencing that. So that's all I'll say, because we already looked at the stats. Okay, so connecting to place. So Melissa and Rebecca, I believe it was, talked about adopting a tree. And this came to me, actually, I was working with kindergarten teachers in Fort McNeil a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about how they would have a classroom tree that they, as you mentioned, looked at in the different seasons. They described the tree, they sketched the tree, they brainstormed questions and did inquiry into the tree. They looked for those answers. They took photos and made a class book of their tree where they each had a description. They wrote letters to the tree, write stories about the tree in the perspective of the tree. They just did such amazing work with a classroom tree. And in this case, they chose a cedar tree, and it was very connected to looking at the land through the lens of Indigenous knowing and being, and how significant that tree was or is. So there's so much that you can do with that, and I just really appreciated them sharing that knowledge with me so that I could then pass it on. So if there's any other ideas that you can think of that you could do with a classroom tree or adopting a tree, I would love for you to put them into the chat box so we can all learn from each other. Okay, so just checking the chat box. Yeah, so if they don't have enough time, going back to the question about what our students might say when we ask them about connecting to a place, maybe we can provide that, right? If they don't have enough time outside of school to connect to nature and connect to place, or maybe they haven't stopped to notice place, we can provide that noticing, that examining, that exploration. And Lisa was writing about can you describe what you just wrote? Because that's super cool.
Yeah, like we just use those, the rolls of colored paper that were on the rolls, and you could wheel that around. It was in the art room, and just getting a big piece of brown paper and using that to make a trunk of a tree with some branches. And then in the fall, everyone would make different colored leaves, and we'd add that. And then starting November, December, the kids would slowly take a few leaves off, and then they'd staple them on the bottom so it looked like the leaves were falling. And then in winter, we'd put some snow, and then it turned into a cherry blossom in the springtime. And it was just really neat because we did have to pay attention to what was going on outside and really notice the changes, and then track that with what our classroom tree looked like. And so when kids had some free time or were looking for something to do, quite often that was something that they wanted to work on and contribute to, is the evolution of our class tree.
Oh, that's such a good idea. And what I really like is, like, you're bringing nature inside the classroom to have that experience all the time for them. And also that it was very place-based, because you mentioned cherry blossoms, and that wouldn't be the same as where I live, looking at our early trees, but having that connection to the local flora and fauna that you're experiencing. Awesome. So having those connections to nature as well. So thinking about how, just what you were kind of saying, Lisa, is bringing, like, what can we add into our classroom that we can bring in from the natural world? So different ways to do that. Now we can also really give our students the opportunity to explore nature and the natural environment, as well as bringing in that curriculum. That's very important as we look at leading a walk or a hike. So you'll notice like means of engagement, living things to notice, identify and describe, descriptive language and communication. Those are curriculum words, right? And so we can bring in the ways that students are noticing, just like you mentioned. We can provide that slowing down and noticing for our students, and sketching and labeling and looking at different things around us that we can identify and describe in terms of birds and amphibians. And then using those description words that are so important, and comparing, contrasting, so many different things that we can do. Okay. Oh, good. Yes. Thanks, Melanie. So comparing different trees, identifying differences, and discussing why trees are different and what helps them survive. Oh, powerful, powerful stuff that we can do with our students around that. Thank you for sharing that. So I came across a wonderful book that I totally recommend called The Walking Curriculum, Evoking Wonder and Developing a Sense of Place. And they describe not only the importance of how purposeful walks that really, have those curricular focuses or a focus or a purpose, but all of the multiple positive consequences that can come through this kind of exercise with our students. So I just pulled out 3, but it's a wonderful resource if you can get your hands on it. So the motion walk, really looking at how, what's moving around you and how is it on the move, and besides seeing movement, how else can you tell things are moving? So again, slowing down and really noticing things. And the line walk, looking at a human-made line and a natural-made line, like maybe a track from an animal, and wondering, where do they lead? How were they chosen to be in this way? And how can we map it out and really make some great theories about the lines that are natural in our environment? And this one I just love, the history walk. So what evidence can you find on your walk that something happened here before this moment? What a wonderful place to connect with place, but what a wonderful way to connect with place, and using as much detail to think, what happened? What are my theories? What's my evidence? How can I describe that as a detective? So lots of wonderful ways that you can work on purposeful walks with your students. And then again, really working on our feelings words, our feelings curriculum is very important in our primary grades as well. So we can use our natural environment to discuss feelings, to discuss how we're feeling and identify those feeling words, and also why we might be feeling them. So this is a way for us to have kind of a third point where we're considering, in this case, rain falling, and using that to invigorate our students and get them interested and engaged in the work of feeling. So I'm going to start this little video, and I want you to share your feelings that are coming up in the chat box with this. So what I saw was those great feeling words, and they were different for everyone. It wasn't like everyone felt peaceful with the rain. Some people felt anxious, some people felt homesick, some people felt lonely, and then other people felt kind of relaxed and sleepy. And that would be a great time to talk with your students about different, everyone has different feelings about connected to different things. And I would guess probably those are connected a lot to where we grew up, what our experience with a lot of rain is, definitely probably a lot of emotion connected to that. So thank you so much for sharing in the chat box how you were feeling with that. Okay, and just to finish up here, some tips for outdoor learning, just because we are, as we do engage with our students in outdoor learning, we're kind of going out of the safety and boundaries of what we're used to with a school, and the safety and boundaries of the school. So anyway, so you could really look at having a plan that you create with the students. So co-creating criteria or some tips with the students about what does outdoor learning look like? How do we make sure that everyone is safe? How do we set the boundaries and ensure that, you know, students are given free time for exploration, and that there might be sit spots that Lisa was mentioning earlier in the presentation, also in the chat box, for our students to engage in that quiet reflection.
And so I'll just mention the source for that is the PSA for environmental educators in BC. So Nadja popped that link into the chat box. They have a lot of other really wonderful resources to support outdoor ed and outdoor learning. And it's from BC teachers. So that's available to you if you're interested in checking out their resources.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lisa. So when I look at this quote, I won't read it at you, but you can refer to it later when you're checking out your handouts and see what you consider the purpose or the meaning of it. But when I looked through this quote, I really got the sense of belonging that we always encourage with our primary classrooms. We always talk about belonging to a community. And I really like that this relates belonging to the natural world, to being a part of something larger to us, to being part of an ecosystem, to being in relationship with other living things. And, you know, the fact that that involves commitment, that involves time to be in nature and experience and feel that sense of belonging and connection, which then easily translates into being an environmental steward and looking after our land in ways that is very important to keep it this way. Okay, so as we close up the workshop here, just thinking about the importance that you have to change the dialogue or to enhance the dialogue of your students by providing those opportunities that maybe they are not getting, as we saw in the beginning of the workshop where Lisa shared those stats with us. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a brief little reflection here. And if you notice, wow, we did so much in this past hour. We looked at, I wonder, it reminds me of, we looked at read alouds to support place-based learning, exploring our seasons with our senses, connecting to place or classroom trees, sound and art projects, and then the walking curriculum. So considering all of that learning, choose one thing that you think you'd like to add to your current literacy routine and write it in the chat box. And I'm going to give you a minute to reflect on that and consider your learning. Okay, so here are the resources that we use to build this workshop. If there's anything that we referred to today, it should be listed on the sources page and the books that we recommended throughout. And we just enjoyed the afternoon with you. So thank you for joining us. And I hope that you can get out and enjoy that beautiful sunshine. And I'm going to leave you with a short video that you might chuckle at.